The conference room fell silent as Robert Coleman's voice faltered mid-sentence. His PowerPoint slide blurred before his eyes, the fluorescent light suddenly too bright, too harsh. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. "Robert?" A voice called from far away. Was it Liz? He couldn't tell anymore. His hand instinctively moved to his collar, now damp with sweat. The room tilted. The familiar pressure in his throat had transformed into searing pain, as if something inside was clawing to get out. "I just need a moment," he managed before his knees buckled. Someone loosened his tie, unbuttoned his collar. There was a collective gasp. Through fading consciousness, he heard his wife Rebecca's voice cut through the chaos. "Oh my God," she whispered. "How long has this been there?" What had begun as a tiny bump 6 months ago was now threatening to end everything they had built together. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Robert Coleman had never considered himself exceptional, just reliable. At 48, he'd built a respectable career as marketing director at Philadelphia's third-largest insurance firm. He drove a sensible sedan, maintained their colonial revival home in Bryn Mawr, and took pride in paying his daughter Ashley's tuition at Penn State without student loans. Ordinary accomplishments, perhaps, but they formed the scaffolding of a life well lived. Rebecca, his wife of 20 years, managed Oak Ridge Elementary with the same steady competence she brought to their marriage. They'd weathered the typical storms, career setbacks, Rebecca's difficult pregnancy with Ashley, the recession of 2008 that nearly cost them their home. Through it all, they'd maintained their annual tradition of adding to their Florida Fund, a savings account dedicated to their shared dream, a modest vacation home in Naples where they'd eventually retire. 2 more years, Robert would say each December as they transferred another chunk of savings. 2 more years and we'll have enough for the down payment. Rebecca would smile, but lately her smile had grown thinner, more perfunctory. The Florida dream felt increasingly distant as college expenses mounted and Robert's company underwent yet another restructuring. Elizabeth Parker, Liz, to everyone at Coleman Insurance, occupied the office across from Robert's. At 42, she possessed the uncanny ability to notice things others missed. It was what made her the firm's top account manager, and more recently, what had drawn her attention to Robert's changing appearance. The occasional winces when he swallowed his coffee, the increasingly higher collars and tighter ties, the pallor beneath his usually robust complexion. "You know, there's a great ENT specialist in my building," she mentioned casually one afternoon. "I could get you in without the usual 3-month wait." Robert had dismissed her with uncharacteristic sharpness. "I don't need doctors picking my pocket for a seasonal cold, Liz." Dr. James Mitchell had built his surgical practice on 2 principles: exceptional care and personal investment. At 55, his reputation at Philadelphia Memorial was unimpeachable, though few knew the private tragedy that drove his particular interest in head and neck pathologies. He kept a photo in his desk drawer, not displayed but near, of a woman with auburn hair and laughing eyes. His wife Catherine, lost 15 years ago to what had initially appeared to be nothing more than a swollen lymph node. Meanwhile, in the Coleman household, routines continued. Rebecca left early each morning, returning late, often too exhausted to notice that Robert now slept propped up with extra pillows to ease his increasingly labored breathing. Their conversations had shortened to logistical exchanges and brief updates about Ashley's college adventures. On their refrigerator, a save-the-date magnet announced their 20th anniversary celebration, planned for June. Beside it hung a brochure for Gulf Coast properties, dog-eared and fading, its glossy images of white sand beaches and palm trees, a testament to dreams deferred but not abandoned. Neither of them could have imagined how insignificant these plans would soon become. The first time Robert noticed the lump was on a Tuesday morning in November. Steam clouded the bathroom mirror as he dragged his razor along his jawline, tilting his chin upward to catch the stubborn hairs beneath. That's when he felt it. A small, hard knot just above his collarbone. He pressed it gently, feeling no pain, just a strange firmness that hadn't been there before. Probably just a swollen gland, he muttered, rinsing his razor. He'd been fighting what he assumed was a cold for the past week. Nothing serious, just a persistent scratchiness in his throat. That evening, while Rebecca attended a school board meeting, Robert found himself typing symptoms into a search engine. Small lump neck, no pain. The results sent a chill through him. Thyroid nodules, lymphoma, cancer. He quickly closed the browser, feeling foolish. Men his age were always finding lumps and bumps. Most turned out to be nothing. "You're not dying, Coleman," he said aloud to the empty room. "Get a grip." By Christmas, the lump had grown to the size of a marble. Robert took to wearing button-down shirts with higher collars, his collection of ties suddenly proving useful beyond office dress code. When Ashley came home from college, he intercepted her customary bear hug with a quick side embrace, avoiding pressure on his neck. "Dad, are you losing weight?" she asked over dinner. "Just watching my cholesterol," he replied, patting his still substantial middle. "Doctor's orders." There had been no doctor. There had been no orders. Just a growing sense of dread each morning as Robert examined the lump in the mirror, watching it slowly transform from a curious anomaly to an undeniable presence. At work, Liz Parker noticed the changes, the perpetually adjusted collar, the wincing when Robert turned his head too quickly, the uncharacteristic decline of lunch invitations. "Everything okay at home?" she asked one afternoon, leaning against his office doorframe. "You seem distracted lately." "Fine," Robert answered too quickly. "Just the Peterson account keeping me up at night." Liz's eyes narrowed slightly. "You know, my sister had Hashimoto's. Started with a swollen thyroid. Nothing serious once they caught it, but..." "I said I'm fine, Liz." His tone ended the conversation, but the concern in her eyes lingered. By February, swallowing had become uncomfortable. Robert found himself choosing softer foods, cutting meat into smaller pieces, washing each bite down with water. Sleep grew elusive as lying flat caused a strange pressure in his throat. He began propping himself up with pillows, telling Rebecca it helped with his acid reflux. Rebecca, meanwhile, was battling her own crisis. The school district had announced potential layoffs, and as the newest principal in the county, her position felt precarious. She spent evenings hunched over spreadsheets and performance reviews, building cases for each of her teachers. When she crawled into bed past midnight, Robert would pretend to be asleep, sparing her from questions about his own growing discomfort. "This too shall pass," his mother used to say. An old Pennsylvania Dutch saying she'd repeat through every hardship. Robert clung to those words as February turned to March, and the lump grew from a marble to a golf ball. One night, as he stood in the bathroom conducting his now ritualistic examination, Rebecca walked in unexpectedly. He wasn't quick enough to adjust his collar. "What's that on your neck?" she asked, toothbrush suspended halfway to her mouth. "Just a swollen gland. Fighting something off." The lie came easily after months of practice. Rebecca stepped closer, reaching toward his neck. Robert backed away reflexively. "It's nothing, Beck. Drop it." Her hand fell to her side, hurt flickering across her face. "Since when do we keep secrets about our health?" "It's not a secret if there's nothing to tell," he said, brushing past her. That night, after Rebecca fell asleep, Robert opened his laptop and created a password-protected document. He titled it "Just in Case" and began typing. Symptoms, dates, changes. If things got worse, Though he told himself they wouldn't, at least there would be a record. Something to explain why he had chosen silence over worry. By April, the lump had developed a reddish hue, visible even beneath his collars. Colleagues had begun to stare, though most were too polite to comment. Liz was not among the polite. "Robert, this has gone on long enough," she said, closing his office door behind her one Tuesday afternoon. "Whatever that is on your neck, it's getting worse. I can see it from across the conference table." "It's under control," he insisted, though nothing was further from the truth. "Is it?" Liz challenged. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're terrified and Rebecca has no idea what's happening. That sound about right?" Robert's silence was answer enough. The quarterly marketing presentation had been on Robert's calendar for months. Despite his worsening condition, he had meticulously prepared his slides, rehearsed his talking points, and even purchased a new tie, navy blue with subtle diagonal stripes, specifically chosen for its ability to draw attention away from his neck when paired with his highest collared shirt. "You sure you're up for this?" Rebecca asked that morning, watching him struggle to knot the tie with trembling fingers. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, the result of another night spent gasping for breath whenever he lay flat. "Just nervous," he replied, finally securing the knot. "Peterson's bringing the regional VP. Big opportunity." Rebecca stepped closer, smoothing an invisible wrinkle from his shoulder. "You don't look well, Rob." Her voice softened. "Maybe it's time to see someone about that. Whatever it is." "After the presentation," he promised, already edging toward the door. "I'll make an appointment tomorrow." It was a promise he had made and broken 3 times in the past month. The conference room was packed when Robert began his presentation. 20 minutes in, as he clicked to a slide showing projected growth for the third quarter, the room began to spin. He gripped the edge of the podium, blinking hard against the sudden vertigo. "As you can see from the graph," his voice sounded distant to his own ears, "the upward trend indicates—" The words dissolved on his tongue. Pressure built in his throat, as if an invisible hand were squeezing from within. Robert tugged at his collar, desperate for air that wouldn't come. The last thing he heard before darkness claimed him was Liz's voice, sharp with alarm. "Someone call 911!" Rebecca had been in the middle of a teacher evaluation when her assistant burst in. The drive to Philadelphia Memorial took 23 minutes. 23 minutes of gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles blanched white. 23 minutes of prayers whispered to a God she only spoke to in emergencies. The emergency room was a cacophony of beeping monitors, squeaking gurney wheels, and the low murmur of worried conversations. Liz met her at the entrance, face drawn with concern. "They've taken him back already," she explained, leading Rebecca through double doors. "His airway was compromised. They're stabilizing him now." Rebecca found her husband in a curtained bay, oxygen mask obscuring half his face, shirt open to reveal monitoring pads on his chest, and exposed for the first time in months the grotesque swelling that had overtaken the left side of his neck. What had once been a small lump had grown to the size of a tennis ball, angry and red, visibly pulsing with each labored breath. "Oh, Robert," she whispered, tears blurring her vision. "Why didn't you tell me?" A young doctor approached, clipboard in hand. "Mrs. Coleman, I'm Dr. Patel. We've stabilized your husband for now, but the mass is putting significant pressure on his trachea. We need to do imaging immediately to determine next steps." "Of course," Rebecca nodded. "Whatever he needs. I'll need you to fill out these consent forms and provide insurance information. The CT scan alone will be around $3,800, and that's before any specialist consultations." Reality crashed in. Their insurance, ironically, from Robert's own company, carried a $5,000 deductible that they hadn't met this year. Money they had earmarked for their Florida dream would now be redirected to this nightmare. Do it, she said firmly. All of it. While Robert underwent imaging, Rebecca paced the waiting room, her mind racing. How long had he been suffering? Why had he hidden this from her? What else didn't she know? He's been tracking it, Liz said quietly, interrupting Rebecca's thoughts. For months now. What do you mean tracking it? Liz pulled out her phone, opening an email. He sent this to himself and accidentally copied me last week. I think he meant to add an attachment but sent this document instead. The email contained a single Word document titled Just in Case. Rebecca's hands shook as she read through Robert's methodical documentation. The first notice of the lump in November. The progressive swelling. Difficulty swallowing that began in January. Breathing problems that started in March. Each entry was clinical, detached, as if he were observing someone else's body betraying them. The final entry, dated just 3 days ago, read, breathing increasingly difficult at night. Can only sleep sitting up now. Dizzy spells more frequent. Should probably tell Rebecca soon, but don't want to worry her with school situations still unresolved. Rebecca handed the phone back to Liz, her voice barely audible. He's been suffering like this for 6 months, and I never noticed. He didn't want you to notice, Liz replied gently. He got very good at hiding it. Dr. Patel returned 4 hours later, accompanied by an older man with silver-streaked hair and a grave expression. Mrs. Coleman, this is Dr. Mitchell, our head of oncology. The word landed like a physical blow. Oncology? Cancer. The imaging shows a significant mass, Dr. Mitchell explained, his voice gentle but direct. Given its location and characteristics, we're concerned it could be thyroid cancer, though we won't know definitively without a biopsy. When can you do that? Rebecca asked, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. That's the issue, Dr. Patel interjected. Your insurance requires pre-authorization for the procedure, which could take 3 to 5 business days. Given the size of the mass and its proximity to your husband's airway, Dr. Mitchell feels that waiting would be inadvisable. So what are you saying? We're saying, Dr. Mitchell clarified, that your husband needs a biopsy and likely surgery immediately, but insurance won't cover it without pre-authorization. The procedures would be out of pocket, roughly $38,000. Rebecca's knees weakened. She sank into a nearby chair. That's not possible. We don't have that kind of money just sitting around. There are options, Dr. Mitchell said. Payment plans, medical credit cards, hospital financial assistance. Or, Liz suggested quietly from the corner, we could raise it. Rebecca looked up. What? Online fundraising. I've already started a draft page. With your permission, I could have it live within the hour. As Rebecca tried to process this suggestion, a nurse appeared at the door. Dr. Mitchell? Mr. Coleman is awake and asking for his wife. Robert lay propped up in the hospital bed, oxygen tubes in his nose, eyes sunken but alert. When Rebecca entered, he reached for her hand. I'm sorry, he whispered, voice raspy. I thought I could handle it myself. Rebecca sat beside him, careful not to disturb the IV lines. All those months of suffering alone. Why, Robert? Why couldn't you just tell me? I didn't want to be a burden. You had enough on your plate with the school and Ashley's tuition. His voice broke. I thought it would go away. By the time I knew it wouldn't, I was in too deep. A tear slipped down Rebecca's cheek. For better or worse, remember? Not just when it's convenient. Not just when you can handle it yourself. Robert nodded, his own eyes welling. I know that now. The days following Robert's collapse unfolded in a blur of medical consultations, financial negotiations, and emotional reckonings. Rebecca took emergency leave from her position at Oak Ridge Elementary, explaining to her superintendent in a voice that barely held steady that family matters required her immediate attention. She didn't elaborate. The words possible cancer felt too heavy to share, as if speaking them might somehow make them more real. Robert was moved from the emergency department to a regular hospital room, though regular felt like a misnomer for a space that cost more per night than their mortgage payment. The mass on his neck continued to cause breathing difficulties, requiring him to remain upright at all times. A parade of specialists filed through his room, each with their own theories and recommendations, each adding to the mounting pile of expenses. The blood work indicates elevated thyroglobulin levels, one doctor explained, pointing to numbers on a chart that meant nothing to Rebecca. Consistent with thyroid abnormalities but not definitive for malignancy. The ultrasound shows significant vascularization, said another, displaying cloudy images where Robert's once normal neck anatomy had been distorted beyond recognition. We really need that biopsy to proceed. Through it all, Liz Parker proved herself not merely a colleague, but a lifeline. While Rebecca maintained a near-constant vigil at Robert's bedside, Liz launched the online fundraiser with a simple, powerful title, Help Robert Coleman Breathe Again. She included a photo of Robert from the company holiday party, healthy, smiling, standing tall beside Rebecca with his arm around her waist. Beside it, with Robert's reluctant permission, she placed a current photo. Robert in his hospital bed, oxygen tubes in his nose, the mass visible above his hospital gown. "I don't want people to see me like this," Robert had protested weakly. "People need to see the truth," Liz countered. "Otherwise they won't understand the urgency." The response was immediate. Colleagues donated first, $50 here, $100 there. Then clients whom Robert had served over the years. Then friends from their church. Then strangers who had read the shared post and felt moved by the Coleman's story. By the end of the first day, the fundraiser had reached $7,500. "It's a start," Liz said, showing Rebecca the total on her phone screen. "But we need to reach more people." Rebecca nodded, her mind elsewhere. That morning, she had experienced a wave of nausea so intense she'd barely made it to the hospital bathroom before losing her breakfast. She'd blamed it on stress and lack of sleep, but a nagging suspicion had taken root. At 45, with a history of endometriosis that had made conceiving Ashley a minor miracle, pregnancy seemed impossible. And yet, while Robert underwent yet another scan, Rebecca slipped out to a pharmacy across the street from the hospital. She purchased a pregnancy test and used it in the store's bathroom, her hands shaking so badly she could barely open the packaging. When 2 pink lines appeared in the result window, she slid down the wall to sit on the cold tile floor, the test clutched in her trembling fingers. "This can't be happening," she whispered to the empty bathroom. "Not now." She didn't tell Robert. How could she? His own health hung in the balance, his body betraying him in one way while hers transformed in another. The timing felt like a cosmic joke, cruel and incomprehensible. She tucked the test into her purse and returned to the hospital, the secret a heavy weight beneath her breastbone. The hospital's financial counselor met with them on the 3rd day, a folder thick with paperwork laid out on the rolling tray table in Robert's room. "We can offer a payment plan spreading the costs over 60 months, she explained, sliding a form toward them, "though that would require a 20% down payment before any procedures." Rebecca did the quick math in her head. Even with the fundraiser's current total, they'd fall short by thousands. Robert must have calculated the same, because his face had taken on a resigned expression she'd never seen before. "What happens if we can't meet that requirement?" he asked quietly. The counselor's practiced smile faltered slightly. "We would stabilize your condition and seek transfer to a county facility where you might qualify for additional assistance." "And how long would that take?" Rebecca pressed. "The waiting list for transfers is currently about 3 weeks." Dr. Mitchell, who had been reviewing Robert's chart in the doorway, stepped forward. "Mr. Coleman doesn't have 3 weeks," he said firmly. "The compression on his trachea is worsening. We need to move forward with surgical intervention within days, not weeks." The counselor shifted uncomfortably. "I understand the medical urgency, doctor, but I don't make the financial policies." As they debated, Robert's hand found Rebecca's, squeezing gently. "It's okay," he whispered. "We'll figure something out." But for the first time in their marriage, Rebecca wasn't sure they would. That evening, as Robert dozed fitfully under the influence of pain medication, Rebecca sat in the vinyl hospital chair flipping through old photos on her phone. Images of their life together scrolled past. Their wedding day, Ashley's birth, family vacations, the anniversary trip to Vermont last year. A life built on a foundation of mutual trust and shared dreams. Until now. Liz arrived with coffee and a paper bag containing a sandwich Rebecca would not eat. "Any news?" she asked, settling into the chair beside Rebecca's. "Just more of the same. They want money we don't have for tests he can't wait for." Liz nodded, her gaze drifting to Robert's sleeping form. "The fundraiser passed $12,000 this afternoon. I'm trying to get a local news station interested." Rebecca felt a surge of gratitude so intense it brought tears to her eyes. "Why are you doing all this, Liz? You barely know us outside of work." Something flickered across Liz's face, an expression Rebecca couldn't quite decipher. "Let's just say I understand what it's like to face the medical system alone," she said after a moment. "No one should have to choose between financial ruin and necessary care." The conversation might have continued, but Rebecca's phone buzzed with an incoming call. Ashley's name flashed on the screen. "Mom?" Her daughter's voice sounded small, frightened. "Liz from Dad's office messaged me. What's going on?" "Is Dad okay?" Rebecca stepped into the hallway, suddenly aware that in the chaos of the past few days, she had failed to inform their only child of her father's condition. The conversation that followed was difficult, full of Ashley's questions that Rebecca could only partially answer, tearful promises that Ashley would drive home from college the next day, and reassurances that felt hollow, even as Rebecca spoke them. When she returned to the room, Liz had gone and Robert was awake, staring at the ceiling with an expression of deep concentration. "Ashley?" he asked, not looking at her. Rebecca nodded, settling back into her chair. "She's coming home tomorrow. I don't want her to see me like this. She needs to see you, period," Rebecca countered gently. "However you are." Silence stretched between them, filled only by the rhythmic beeping of monitors and the muffled hospital sounds from the hallway. Finally, Robert spoke again, his voice low and strained. "I found your test," he said. "In your purse. I was looking for gum." Rebecca's breath caught. The pregnancy test. She'd forgotten to dispose of it in her rush back to the hospital. "Were you going to tell me?" he asked, finally turning to meet her gaze. "I only found out today," she replied. "And with everything happening, I didn't know how." Robert's eyes filled with tears. "We're having another baby?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications neither was ready to address. After 20 years of marriage, they were facing not only a life-threatening illness, but also an unexpected new life. The incongruity was staggering. "Yes," she whispered. "Apparently, we are." A complex mix of emotions crossed Robert's face. Joy, fear, disbelief, and something deeper, more primal. His hand moved unconsciously to his neck, fingers brushing the mass that threatened his future, now inextricably linked with another's beginning. "I need to be here for this child," he said, voice breaking. "I need to survive this." The next morning brought both Ashley's arrival and an unexpected summons from Dr. Mitchell. He requested a meeting with both Robert and Rebecca in a small consultation room down the hall from Robert's room. Ashley remained behind, promising to answer Robert's constantly ringing work phone and update the growing list of concerned callers. Dr. Mitchell entered the consultation room carrying Robert's thick medical file and wearing an expression that Rebecca had come to recognize, the carefully neutral look doctors adopted when delivering difficult news. "The latest imaging gives us a clearer picture," he began without preamble. "The mass is actually two distinct entities, a large fluid-filled cyst that's causing the immediate breathing difficulties, and behind it, a smaller, more solid nodule with characteristics consistent with papillary thyroid carcinoma." The medical terminology washed over Rebecca like a wave, leaving only one word clearly visible in its wake: carcinoma. Cancer. "What does that mean for treatment?" Robert asked, his voice steadier than Rebecca would have expected. "We need to remove both the cyst and the suspicious nodule immediately," Dr. Mitchell explained. "The cyst is the more urgent concern as it's compressing your airway, but the nodule requires attention as well, a biopsy at minimum, though given its appearance I would recommend complete removal of the affected lobe of your thyroid." "And the prognosis?" Rebecca managed to ask. Dr. Mitchell's expression softened slightly. "If it is papillary thyroid cancer, the good news is that it's typically slow-growing and highly treatable. The 5-year survival rate exceeds 95% when caught before metastasis, and there's no evidence from the imaging that it has spread beyond the thyroid." A small flame of hope flickered to life in Rebecca's chest. "So he'll be okay? If you can do the surgery?" "That's my expectation, yes," Dr. Mitchell nodded. "But we need to proceed quickly, and that brings us to the matter of moving forward without insurance pre-approval." Rebecca's hope dimmed. They were back to the impossible financial situation. "We're working on it," she said. "The fundraiser is growing, but we're still short of what we need for the down payment." Dr. Mitchell studied them both for a long moment, then closed Robert's file with a decisive snap. "I've reviewed your case with the hospital administration," he said. "I've agreed to waive my surgical fee, and they've approved a hardship reduction for the hospital costs. That should bring the required down payment within reach of your current fundraising total." Rebecca stared at him in disbelief. "You would do that? Why?" Something in Dr. Mitchell's expression shifted, a brief glimpse of old pain quickly masked by professional detachment. "Let's just say I have personal reasons for believing that financial constraints should never determine who receives life-saving care," he said quietly. "We'll schedule the surgery for tomorrow morning. Get some rest, both of you. The hard part is just beginning." The operating room at Philadelphia Memorial stood ready at 7 a.m., bathed in the harsh white light that stripped away all softness, all pretense. Surgical instruments gleamed on stainless steel trays, monitors beeped steadily, screens displaying vital signs not yet connected to a patient. The room had a peculiar smell, antiseptic and expectant, as if the space itself knew what was coming. Robert was prepped for surgery in a small antechamber, a nurse methodically inserting IVs while an anesthesiologist explained the sedation process in a voice practiced at sounding both authoritative and reassuring. Robert nodded mechanically, but his eyes sought only Rebecca, who stood clutching his wedding ring and watch in trembling hands. "Remember our trip to Cape May?" he asked suddenly, his voice hoarse from weeks of strain. Rebecca nodded, surprised by the unexpected memory. "Our 5th anniversary. You wanted to swim, but I wouldn't go in past my knees." His lips curved in a weak smile. "I was scared of jellyfish. Seems silly now." "You stood on the shore for 2 hours watching me," she replied, throat tight with unshed tears. "Said someone had to be ready to save me if I got pulled under." Robert's eyes met hers, suddenly clear and intense despite the preoperative medication beginning to course through his veins. "Who's going to save you if I don't make it?" "Don't," she whispered, leaning forward to press her forehead against his. "You're going to be fine," Dr. Mitchell promised. The anesthesiologist cleared his throat gently. "It's time, Mr. Coleman." Rebecca watched them wheel her husband away, his body suddenly small beneath the thin hospital blanket. Ashley appeared at her side, linking their arms together in silent support. Together they walked to the surgical waiting room where Liz already sat, laptop open, monitoring the fundraiser that had now reached $18,500, still growing, still connecting the Colemans to a web of support they'd never known existed. "Dad's going to be okay," Ashley said with the absolute certainty of youth. "He's too stubborn not to be." Rebecca squeezed her daughter's hand but said nothing. What could she say? That she'd missed the signs of her husband's illness for months? That she was carrying a child that Robert might never meet? That their carefully constructed life had been revealed as frighteningly fragile in the span of a single week? The surgery was expected to last 3 to 4 hours. Rebecca spent the first hour pacing, the second staring blankly at magazines without reading a word, and the third in the hospital chapel, not praying exactly, but sitting in the hushed silence, allowing the weight of uncertainty to press her into stillness. At the 2-hour and 40-minute mark, Dr. Mitchell appeared in the waiting room doorway, still dressed in surgical scrubs, his mask pulled down around his neck. Rebecca lurched to her feet, heart hammering. "He's stable," Dr. Mitchell said immediately, recognizing the terror in her eyes. "The surgery was more complex than anticipated, but we've removed both the cyst and the suspicious nodule." "So it's over?" Ashley asked, reaching for her mother's hand. "He's going to be okay?" Dr. Mitchell gestured toward the empty seats. "Let's sit down." The three women sank onto the institutional furniture, bodies tense with anticipation. "The cyst was severely compressing the trachea," he explained, his tone measured. "We were able to remove it intact, which should immediately improve his breathing. The nodule behind it was smaller but more concerning. I've sent it to pathology, but based on its appearance and location, I believe we're dealing with papillary thyroid carcinoma as suspected." "Cancer," Rebecca said flatly. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Dr. Mitchell confirmed. "But if that's confirmed, it's one of the most treatable forms, especially when caught before it spreads. We removed the entire right lobe of the thyroid along with the nodule. The preliminary margins look clean, which means we likely got all of it." "Likely?" Liz echoed, her voice sharp with concern. Dr. Mitchell nodded. "We won't know for certain until the pathology report comes back, which should be within 48 hours. Depending on those results, Robert may need radioactive iodine therapy as a follow-up, but many patients don't require further treatment beyond monitoring." Rebecca processed this information slowly, her exhausted mind struggling to separate the reassuring words from the underlying caution. "When can we see him?" "He's in recovery now. Once he's awake and stable, they'll move him to the ICU for overnight observation, then back to a regular room tomorrow if all goes well. You should be able to see him in about an hour." As Dr. Mitchell rose to leave, Rebecca caught his sleeve. "Thank you," she said, the words wholly inadequate for what she felt. "For everything." A shadow crossed the surgeon's face, so quickly Rebecca might have imagined it, before he nodded once and turned away. The first sight of Robert after surgery was jarring. His neck was bandaged, a drain tube extending from beneath the white gauze. His skin had a grayish pallor that made the oxygen tubes in his nose stand out starkly. Monitors beeped, recording the steady rhythm of his heart, the adequate but not ideal oxygen levels in his blood. He looked both better and worse than Rebecca had expected, alive, breathing independently, but undeniably altered. When his eyes fluttered open, focusing slowly on her face, Rebecca felt a surge of relief so powerful it made her knees buckle. She sank into the chair beside his bed, taking his hand carefully around the IV line. "Hey there," she whispered. Robert's lips moved, but no sound emerged. He frowned slightly, then tried again, managing a raspy whisper. "Did they get it?" "Yes," she nodded, tears spilling freely now. "They got it all." His eyes drifted closed again, the effort of consciousness too much for his depleted body. Rebecca sat with him through the night, dozing intermittently in the uncomfortable chair, waking at each change in his breathing, each shift of his body beneath the thin hospital blanket. Ashley had returned to their home to shower and bring back fresh clothes. Liz had finally been persuaded to do the same after updating the fundraiser with news of the successful surgery. In the quiet hours before dawn, as Rebecca watched the gentle rise and fall of her husband's chest, Dr. Mitchell appeared in the doorway. He looked haggard, as if he, too, had spent the night without proper rest. "You should be sleeping," he said softly, entering the room to check Robert's monitors. "So should you," Rebecca countered. "Don't you ever go home?" A faint smile crossed his face. "Not often enough, according to my cat." He made a notation in Robert's chart, then hesitated, seeming to debate something internally before speaking again. "There's something I'd like to show you, if you'll come with me for a moment." Curious, Rebecca followed him down the quiet corridor to a small office. Unlike the sterile hospital rooms, this space felt personal. Bookshelves lined with medical texts, a desk cluttered with papers, walls adorned with framed diplomas, and a single photograph of a smiling woman with auburn hair. Dr. Mitchell gestured to the photo. "My wife, Catherine. She died 15 years ago from thyroid cancer that went undiagnosed until it was too late." Rebecca's breath caught. "I'm so sorry." "She had a small lump, just like your husband," he continued, his voice low. "But we were young, just starting our careers. No insurance. By the time we could afford to have it checked, the cancer had metastasized to her lungs." Understanding dawned slowly. "That's why you're helping us. Why you waived your fee." Dr. Mitchell nodded, his gaze still fixed on the photograph. "After she died, I went back to school, became an oncologist specializing in head and neck pathologies, and I made a promise that I would never let financial constraints determine who received care." He turned to face her, eyes bright with conviction. No one should die from a treatable cancer because they can't afford treatment. The revelation hung between them, reshaping Rebecca's understanding of this man who held her husband's life in his hands. Not just a skilled surgeon, but someone intimately acquainted with the very fear that had haunted her sleepless nights. "The preliminary pathology report came back early," he said, changing the subject abruptly. "I wanted you to be the first to know. The nodule was indeed papillary thyroid carcinoma, but it was contained. No vascular invasion, no extension beyond the thyroid capsule. Stage 1. Which means?" "Which means," Dr. Mitchell said, a genuine smile breaking through his professional reserve, "that your husband has an excellent prognosis. With proper follow-up, there's every reason to believe he'll make a complete recovery." The surge of relief was so intense, Rebecca had to grip the edge of the desk to remain standing. After days of accumulated tension, of worst-case scenarios playing on endless loop in her mind, the promise of Robert's recovery felt almost too much to bear. "Thank you," she whispered, the words still woefully inadequate. "For saving him. For telling me about Catherine, for everything." Dr. Mitchell's eyes softened. "Go back to your husband, Mrs. Coleman. He's going to need you in the coming weeks. Recovery isn't easy, but you're both stronger than you know." As Rebecca turned to leave, Dr. Mitchell added quietly, "And congratulations on the baby. Catherine and I always wanted children. It's a precious gift, even when it comes at an unexpected time." The days following Robert's surgery unfolded in a pattern of small victories and unexpected setbacks. He was moved from the ICU to a regular room after 24 hours, his breathing noticeably improved without the pressure of the cyst against his trachea. The surgical drain was removed on the third day, leaving behind what would eventually become a thin, white scar, a permanent reminder of how close they'd come to losing everything. But recovery proved more challenging than either of them had anticipated. Robert's voice, once robust enough to command boardrooms, emerged as a raspy whisper, damaged by the proximity of the surgery to his vocal cords. The right side of his neck felt perpetually numb, nerve endings disrupted by the surgeon's knife. Worst of all was the profound fatigue that seemed to seep from his very bones, making even the simple act of walking to the bathroom an exercise in endurance. "I didn't expect to feel this weak," he confessed to Rebecca one afternoon, frustration evident in his face. "It's like someone unplugged me from my power source." "Dr. Mitchell says it's normal," she reminded him gently. "Your body's been through trauma. It needs time." Time was the one thing they suddenly had in abundance, and yet also the resource that felt most precious, most finite. The final pathology report confirmed Dr. Mitchell's initial assessment: Stage 1 papillary thyroid carcinoma, completely excised, no evidence of spread. Robert would need lifelong thyroid medication and regular monitoring, but the immediate threat had passed. He had been granted more time, a future that had seemed dangerously uncertain just days before. The financial reality, however, remained stark. Even with Dr. Mitchell's waived surgical fee and the hospital's hardship reduction, the bills continued to arrive with alarming regularity. Physical therapy, medication, follow-up scans. Each carried a price tag that chipped away at their savings, their security, their dreams. "We need to call the bank about the Florida fund," Robert said one evening, a week after his discharge. They sat at their kitchen table, the surface covered with medical bills and insurance statements arranged in neat, depressing stacks. "Use what's left to start paying these down." Rebecca nodded, though the thought of liquidating their vacation home savings, the tangible representation of 20 years of careful planning, felt like surrendering a piece of their shared identity. "I'll do it tomorrow." Ashley, who had postponed her return to college to help during Robert's initial recovery, looked up from her laptop across the room. "Before you do that, you might want to check the fundraiser." Rebecca turned, surprised. "Is it still active? I thought donations had tapered off." Ashley's smile was the first genuine one Rebecca had seen in days. "Liz got the local news to do a story. It aired yesterday while you were at the pharmacy. They interviewed Dad's boss, a few clients, even Dr. Mitchell." She turned her laptop to face them. The fundraiser page showed a total that made Rebecca blink twice to ensure she wasn't misreading: $35,742. "That's impossible," Robert whispered, leaning forward to see the screen better. "Not impossible," Ashley countered. "Just people caring. Look at the comments." Robert and Rebecca scrolled through pages of messages accompanying the donations. "Robert handled my company's insurance for 10 years. He always took the time to explain things. Now it's our turn to help. Don't know you personally, but my dad had thyroid cancer 5 years ago. Pulling for your family." From the Oak Ridge Elementary teachers, "We love you, Mrs. Coleman." Rebecca's vision blurred with tears. The kindness was overwhelming, almost incomprehensible after weeks of fighting a system that had seemed designed to defeat them at every turn. "We can't accept this," Robert said suddenly, his voice strained. "It's too much. These people worked for their money. We can't just take it." Rebecca recognized the pride in his reaction, the same stubborn self-sufficiency that had kept him silent as the mass grew in his neck. Before she could respond, Ashley closed her laptop with a decisive snap. "Dad," she said, her tone brooking no argument, "this isn't charity. This is community. This is what people do for each other when the system fails. And if you were on the other side, you'd be the first one donating." The truth of her statement hung in the air between them. After a long moment, Robert nodded once, accepting if not entirely comfortable with their new reality as recipients rather than providers. The next morning brought another revelation, this one more personal and potentially more devastating. Rebecca woke to intense cramping and spotting, symptoms that sent fear coursing through her. At 45, with a history of difficult pregnancies, she knew the statistics. She knew the risks. In the bathroom, she pressed her palm against her still flat abdomen, whispering words that were half prayer, half plea. "Please hold on. Please stay with us. We need you now, more than ever." She didn't tell Robert, not immediately. He was already struggling with his recovery, with the adjustment to medication that left him alternately jittery and exhausted as they worked to find the right dosage. Instead, she called her obstetrician, described her symptoms, and was instructed to come in immediately. The waiting room at her doctor's office felt like neutral territory after weeks in hospitals, less institutional, more feminine with its soft lighting and pastel walls. Still, Rebecca couldn't shake the sense of dread as she waited, flipping through magazines without registering a single word. "Mrs. Coleman?" The nurse's voice cut through her thoughts. "The doctor will see you now." The examination was brief but thorough. Blood drawn, ultrasound performed, questions answered with a clinical detachment that Rebecca found herself adopting as a shield against potential grief. "There," the doctor said finally, pointing to the ultrasound screen. "Heartbeat is strong. Fetal development appears normal for 8 weeks gestation." Rebecca's own heart seemed to stutter. "So the baby is okay?" "The baby looks fine," the doctor confirmed. "The spotting is concerning but not uncommon, especially in pregnancies of advanced maternal age." She softened the clinical term with a small smile. "But given your history and the recent stress, I'd like you on modified bed rest for the next few weeks. Minimal activity, no lifting, no stress." No stress. Rebecca almost laughed at the absurdity of the instruction. How did one avoid stress while managing a husband's cancer recovery, a financial crisis, and an unexpected pregnancy all at once? Yet, as she drove home, a curious calm settled over her. The baby was alive. Robert was recovering. They had support, financial, emotional, practical, that they'd never known existed. Perhaps they would survive this after all. Robert was asleep when she returned, his body still requiring far more rest than his driven personality wanted to accept. Rebecca stood in the doorway of their bedroom, watching the rise and fall of his chest, noting the hollows beneath his cheekbones where weight had fallen away during his illness. He looked vulnerable in sleep, the careful armor of competence and control temporarily set aside. Beside him on the nightstand lay a small notebook she didn't recognize. Curiosity drew her closer. The cover read simply, "For my child," in Robert's precise handwriting. She hesitated, respecting his privacy, but something compelled her to open it. Inside she found pages of advice, memories, and reflections, a father's legacy recorded for a child he feared he might never meet. The first entry was dated the day after his diagnosis. Rebecca stood frozen, the notebook trembling slightly in her hands. The first entry, dated the day after Robert's diagnosis, was written in handwriting less steady than his usual precise script. "To my child, whom I may never meet, I found out today that I have what doctors believe is thyroid cancer. Your mother doesn't know she's carrying you yet, or perhaps she does and hasn't told me, trying to protect me as I tried to protect her. Either way, I'm writing this so you'll know who your father was, if I don't get the chance to show you myself." The words blurred as tears filled Rebecca's eyes. She turned the page. "I want you to know that the happiest day of my life was when your sister Ashley was born. I expect your arrival would have matched that joy. There's something miraculous about holding a life you helped create, a perfect continuation of love made tangible." I hope I live to experience that miracle twice." Rebecca closed the notebook gently and returned it to the nightstand. This was not meant for her eyes. Not yet. It was a father's legacy, written in the shadow of mortality, a bridge across the chasm of uncertainty. She would respect its privacy, even as the knowledge of its existence filled her with equal parts grief and gratitude. As she turned away, Robert stirred. "Beck?" His voice was still raspy, a lingering reminder of the surgical trauma to his vocal cords. "I'm here," she said, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. "How are you feeling?" "Better." He studied her face. "You've been crying. What happened at the doctor's?" Rebecca hesitated, then decided truth was the only way forward. "The baby's fine. Strong heartbeat. But I'm spotting, which means I need to take it easy for a while." Robert reached for her hand, his fingers thinner than they'd been a month ago, but still warm, still alive. "I saw you with the notebook," he said quietly. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have—" "No," he interrupted. "I want you to read it. I started it thinking I might not be here, but now—" He squeezed her hand. "Now maybe we can fill it together. Write the happy chapters I wasn't sure I'd see." The moment of connection was interrupted by the doorbell. Ashley's voice called from downstairs. "Mom, Liz is here with someone." Rebecca helped Robert into his robe, the simple act of dressing still requiring more energy than he could easily summon. Together, they made their way slowly downstairs to find Liz in the living room, accompanied by a woman with a notepad, Jennifer Simmons, the reporter who had covered their story for the local news. "I hope you don't mind," Liz said, looking slightly apprehensive. "Jennifer wanted to do a follow-up piece. The response to Robert's story has been overwhelming." Jennifer stepped forward, her expression professional but kind. "We rarely see community fundraisers gain this kind of traction. People are invested in your outcome, Mr. Coleman. They want to know you're okay." Robert lowered himself carefully into his armchair, exhaustion evident in the lines of his face. "It's still hard to believe people care this much about a stranger's medical problems." "That's just it," Jennifer replied, opening her notebook. "You're not a stranger to them anymore. Your story resonated because it could happen to anyone. A health crisis, insurance limitations, impossible choices." As she spoke, Rebecca noticed something oddly familiar about Jennifer's mannerisms. The way she tilted her head slightly when listening, the particular gesture of tucking hair behind her ear. It reminded her of someone, though she couldn't quite place who. The interview proceeded gently, Jennifer careful not to tax Robert's limited energy. She asked about his recovery, their plans moving forward, how the fundraiser had impacted their situation. Throughout, Liz sat quietly observing, occasionally adding context about the online campaign's growth. When they reached a natural pause, Liz excused herself to use the bathroom. In her absence, Jennifer leaned forward slightly, her professional demeanor shifting to something more personal. "There's something I haven't mentioned," she said, her voice lower. "The reason I was so interested in your story specifically." She hesitated, then continued. "My mother died of thyroid cancer when I was 12. By the time they caught it, it was too late. The doctor who finally diagnosed her was James Mitchell." Rebecca felt a jolt of recognition. "Dr. Mitchell?" "Our Dr. Mitchell?" Jennifer nodded. "He was just starting his practice then. After my mother died, he sent me a card every year on my birthday until I turned 18. I never understood why until I saw him in my footage speaking about your case. The way he talked about medical access, about early intervention." She trailed off, emotion briefly overtaking her professional composure. "He told me about his wife," Rebecca said softly. "Catherine. She died from undiagnosed thyroid cancer." "Catherine," Jennifer repeated, a strange expression crossing her face. My mother's name was Catherine. The air in the room seemed to still. Robert and Rebecca exchanged a glance, the implication dawning simultaneously. "Dr. Mitchell is your father," Robert said, not a question, but a realization. Jennifer shook her head quickly. "No, my father was David Simmons. He raised me after Mom died." She paused, uncertainty crossing her face. "At least that's what I've always believed." The conversation might have continued down this unexpected path, but Liz returned, followed by Ashley carrying a tray of coffee mugs. The moment of revelation passed. Though Rebecca filed away the strange coincidence, another piece in the increasingly complex mosaic of connections surrounding Robert's illness. After the interview concluded and their visitors departed, Robert sat longer than usual in his armchair, lost in thought. "What is it?" Rebecca asked, recognizing the particular furrow between his brows that indicated deep contemplation. "I've been thinking about what happens next," he said slowly, "after I recover fully." "Back to work? Back to normal?" she suggested, though even as she spoke the words, she recognized their impossibility. There was no going back to normal. Normal had been irreversibly altered. "I don't want to go back to selling insurance," Robert said, the admission seemingly difficult for him. "For 20 years I've helped companies minimize their risks, find loopholes, save money, and then when I needed help myself, the system failed us," Rebecca finished for him. "Not just us, thousands of families every day." He straightened slightly in his chair, a spark of the old Robert, the decisive, purposeful man, showing through his physical frailty. "I want to do something about it. Use what I know about insurance from the inside to help people navigate the system. Maybe work with Liz on expanding the online platform she created." Rebecca studied her husband's face, seeing not just determination, but something that had been missing for months before his diagnosis: passion, purpose. "What about our Florida fund?" she asked, testing him. "The dream house?" Robert's gaze shifted to the window, where late afternoon light cast long shadows across their backyard. "Some dreams change," he said simply. "Sometimes better ones take their place." 18 months passed like the turning of seasons, gradual yet transformative. The Coleman household weathered winter's recovery, spring's tentative rebirth, summer's strengthening, and autumn's harvest of new purpose. On a crisp October morning, Robert stood at a podium in the Philadelphia Memorial Hospital auditorium, his voice mostly recovered, though slightly deeper than before. The scar on his neck, once angry and red, had faded to a thin white line that he no longer bothered to hide beneath high collars. Before him sat an audience of nearly 200, medical professionals, cancer survivors, community members, and journalists. The banner above read, "Medical Navigation Foundation, First Annual Healthcare Advocacy Conference." 18 months ago, Robert began, I collapsed during a business presentation because of what began as a tiny bump on my neck that I ignored for too long. He paused, his gaze finding Rebecca in the front row. She sat with their infant daughter, Caroline, cradled in her arms, Ashley beside them, home from college for the weekend. "That bump turned out to be cancer, and it nearly cost me everything," he continued, detailing the journey that had brought him to this moment. The diagnosis, the financial barriers, the unexpected groundswell of community support that had not only saved his life, but transformed it. As he spoke, Dr. Mitchell slipped into the back of the auditorium, nodding slightly in acknowledgement when Robert caught his eye. "What began as a personal crisis became a calling," Robert explained. "The Medical Navigation Foundation was born from the recognition that too many families face impossible choices between financial stability and necessary medical care. In our first year, we've helped over 100 families navigate insurance appeals, connect with specialists, and access funding for treatments their insurance wouldn't cover. The audience applauded as Robert gestured to Liz, who stood and waved briefly. Their partnership had evolved from colleague to friend to business partner with a seamlessness that still sometimes surprised them both. The online fundraising platform she'd created for Robert had become the template for a more robust system, connecting patients with resources and donors with specific medical causes. Today, I'm pleased to announce the launch of our newest initiative, Robert continued, the Catherine Mitchell Memorial Fund, specifically dedicated to supporting early detection and treatment of thyroid cancer in uninsured and underinsured patients. In the back of the room, Dr. Mitchell's composed professional facade briefly cracked, emotion washing across his face at the unexpected tribute to his late wife. Rebecca had worked with him for months to establish the fund, carefully navigating the surgeon's initial reluctance to accept such public recognition. None of this would have been possible without the generosity of strangers who became friends, colleagues who became family, and medical professionals who remembered that behind every diagnosis is a human being with dreams and fears. Robert's voice softened. And none of it would matter without the second chance I've been given to be a husband, a father to my daughters, both of them. As Robert concluded his speech to standing applause, Rebecca felt a familiar hand on her shoulder. Jennifer Simmons, no longer just a reporter, but now the Foundation's media director, leaned down to whisper, "I still can't believe how many lives have been changed because you refused to give up." The connection between Jennifer and Dr. Mitchell had proven more complex than a simple coincidence. DNA testing had confirmed what they had begun to suspect. James Mitchell was indeed Jennifer's biological father, though he had never known of her existence. Catherine, pregnant and unmarried in an era less forgiving of such circumstances, had married David Simmons before her daughter's birth. The revelation had initially brought shock, then tentative reconciliation, and finally a healing that seemed to complete a circle broken 15 years earlier. After the conference concluded, the Coleman family gathered in the hospital garden, the same space where Robert had spent many difficult hours during his treatment, now transformed by autumn colors into a canvas of russet and gold. Dr. Mitchell joined them, more comfortable now in the role of friend than physician. "Caroline's getting bigger every time I see her," he remarked, smiling at the infant who gurgled happily in her mother's arms. 5 months old and already trying to crawl, Rebecca confirmed. "She's determined, just like her father." Robert laughed, the sound free and unburdened in a way it hadn't been for nearly 2 years. "Stubborn, you mean, though I prefer to call it persistent." As they talked, a man approached hesitantly from across the garden. Middle-aged, with graying temples and a cautious expression, he hovered at the edge of their group until Robert noticed him. "Can I help you?" Robert asked. The man stepped forward. "My name is Michael Pearson. I heard your speech today." He swallowed visibly. "Last week I found a lump on my neck. I've been ignoring it, telling myself it was nothing. I couldn't afford to be sick, not with a mortgage and kids in college." Robert nodded, understanding immediately. "But today changed your mind?" "Your story." It was like hearing my own thoughts, spoken aloud. Michael's voice wavered slightly. "The part about silence not being strength, that hit home. Have you seen a doctor yet?" "Doctor?" Mitchell asked, slipping naturally into his professional role. Michael shook his head. "I wouldn't know where to begin. My insurance has a $7,500 deductible." Robert and Liz exchanged glances, a silent communication born of months working together. "That's exactly why we're here," Robert said, extending his hand. "Let's talk about getting you seen tomorrow." As the sun began to set over Philadelphia, casting long shadows across the hospital garden where so much pain and healing had occurred, Rebecca watched her husband, once so determined to bear his burdens alone, welcome another stranger into the circle of care they had created together. Some dreams change. Sometimes better ones take their place. Life has a way of revealing what truly matters when we least expect it. Robert's journey from hiding a small bump to founding a life-changing organization reminds us that our greatest struggles often lead to our most meaningful purpose. For those of us who've weathered decades of life's storms, Robert and Rebecca's story resonates deeply. The carefully saved retirement dream suddenly reprioritized, the vulnerability of asking for help after years of self-reliance, the discovery that community still exists in our increasingly disconnected world. Their story teaches us that even in our 50s, 60s, and beyond, we can find new purpose that surpasses our original dreams. It's never too late to transform personal pain into community healing. Perhaps the most valuable inheritance we can leave isn't a vacation home or financial security, but the lives we've touched by sharing our struggles openly. Has there been a health crisis or personal challenge that changed your perspective on what matters most in life? Or have you, like Robert, discovered an unexpected purpose during your retirement years that's more fulfilling than your original plans? Share your story in the comments. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.